Hello, today I am speaking with Dusk Liney. Dusk, she, her, lives in Altona Meadows on Boiwuring country, and she's in her third year as a birth doula, but she's worked as a space holder for a decade. Dusk's focus is on supporting survivors of sexual assault or trauma, and she's currently creating the Resilient Care Hub, a space for supporting survivors as they navigate pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. Dusk is a survivor of childhood sexual assault, so she's personally driven to support others navigating the unique challenges of pregnancy like she did. As she experienced a lot of silencing in her childhood and early 20s, she was always drawn to listen to other people. This resulted in her creating a business called The Listening Squad, and then later, The Listening Mama. She's currently in the midst of a Masters of Spirituality, where she is trained as a spiritual companion, and she calls it her Masters in Listening. She brings all of this into her work, and she also supports pregnant people experiencing grief, which is informed by the loss of her mother in her first year postpartum. I hope you enjoy listening to our conversation, and you can connect with Dusk or find out more about her and her offerings in the show notes. Welcome to the Whole Doula podcast. The Whole Doula podcast is a conversation space for doulas and birth workers to talk about the diverse paths that led them to birth work, as well as the diverse and unique skills, interests and offerings they bring to their birth-keeping roles. Here I dive into conversations with others who may be wondering how to bring the different aspects and experiences of their own lives into their roles as doulas in business. After all, there is more than one way to doula, and I'd love to help others see the connections between all the different parts of themselves, to see themselves as a whole doula. I am your host, Mary Giordano, doula, birth educator, counsellor and doula business mentor, and this is the Whole Doula podcast. I hope you enjoy listening. Thank you so much for joining me on the Whole Doula podcast, Dusk. It's really lovely to have you here. And I'd love to hear firstly how you refer to yourself as a birth worker, if you are a doula or otherwise. What do you do in this space?
Well, I would say I'm a birth doula. I've just started doing postpartum work as well, and I'm a matrescence coach. But I also, I suppose, like to refer to myself as a trauma-aware birth worker and an advocate for trauma-aware maternal care.
So important.
Yeah.
Wow. Hopefully we'll hear some more about that really important area of work. So I'd love to hear, I know you've sent me this through, but I'd love to hear what was your journey to birth work? How did you become a doula? How did you move into this space? And what were you doing beforehand?
Yeah, I kind of feel like it was a bit of an accident, like I fell down and I got up a doula. When I was pregnant with my first child, or my only child, I was very aware that as a survivor of sexual assault, things could come up for me in my pregnancy and my birth. Thankfully, I had a midwife as a friend who had kind of just gently, let me know that because of my experience that may influence my journey in a different way. And so I was very lucky to get into midwifery group practice. So I had an amazing midwife, but when it came time to me naming, what are the various kind of resources that I can find as a survivor that are specific to my experience, there was just nothing that she could refer me to. She kind of said, just Google the positive birth movement or look up Shalom Stone, which was about 7 years ago. And I just, whilst I had really good midwifery care, I felt like my experience as a survivor and someone who had experienced complex, trauma, that there was nothing out there for me. And I remember thinking, I want to create something so that the next time somebody Googles, survivor giving birth, that there's something there for them, because there needs to be, there's so many of us who are impacted by, sadly, this experience. And it's such a layered experience in pregnancy, birth, postpartum. There's the physical aspects that are mirrored. There's also the emotional landscape of becoming a parent and protecting your child. So yeah, there's a lot there. And so when I kind of had my daughter, I just was like, I want to create something. And that's what led me, into the path of exploring birth work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing. So I'd actually like to ask you straight away, and get straight into, what did you find, or what in the years since then? Because how old is your daughter now?
She's 6.
She's 6. So in the past 6 years, just for listeners and anybody else who might resonate and have a similar story to you, are there any resources you can just throw out, or books, or articles, or anything that you can just name that I will also take a note of to put in the show notes?
Yeah,
others may benefit from.
For doulas and maternal care practitioners, there's a training called When Survivors Give Birth by Penny Simkin, and a book that she's written. So that's a really good resource for, people in the space.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of, as someone navigating it as in pregnancy, there's a few rare articles I can send, to you what I found after.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I can just put them in the notes at the bottom for people to look up.
Yeah, but at the moment it's been a really interesting journey, but I have this kind of vision for the Centre of Resilient Care, which is an online hub for survivors to find those resources, because I think it's such a huge, it's such a huge thing to navigate. There needs to be, a public space for it, where all of those resources can kind of be drawn together. But as I've found myself, like, I've had that on my heart for well over a year, but it's been a really mirrored journey for me around putting it out there, because I've been through, like, why would anyone care? And, no one's going to believe that this is important. And so many of the experiences that I had in kind of giving voice to my own trauma, has been mirrored in my process of wanting to bring this work out into the world. And so over the last year, I've been on this really inner journey of just, I guess, processing, what it is to, I guess, be a peer support in this space, and also an educator, from a lived experience. And it's been big and healing and beautiful and challenging.
Yeah, like most healing journeys, I suppose. So the Centre of Resilient Care is a hub that you're creating.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is just an online hub, or is there a vision for an in-person bricks and mortar hub as well?
Can you imagine? I would love that. At the moment, it's, it's very small. Like, I just imagine just it's just that vision of, I want to go back to that, pregnant me, and be able to type into Google support for pregnant survivors, and for that to come up, and to be a welcoming space where, firstly, people are acknowledged that their experience as a survivor, the things that are coming up for them, or more broadly, people who've experienced trauma, that there's nothing wrong with them, that the things that are coming up for them are so understandable, and that they're not alone, and that they're, I think our culture is very deficit based when it comes to people who've experienced trauma. And that's why I love the word resiliency, because it's about, looking at the strengths and really drawing on those strengths.
Yeah, amazing. As someone on a journey myself of sort of just discovering some health concerns that have been existing for long term as well, and not understanding that they were actually not normal things that I was coping with, I'm also finding a lot of solace and support in the groups of others who are on a similar journey. And it's a really mixed feeling, I find, between that sort of identification and reassurance that I'm not alone and I'm actually not broken, with also anger and sadness that so many people go through this for so many years without realizing that they don't actually need to, that it's not just normal existence.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as you mentioned before we started recording, there's, just so many issues around lack of research and funding given to women's health, and different to obviously the sexual trauma and survivor of sexual trauma that you're referring to, but I can see some crossovers and similarities there as well.
Definitely. Well, there's just such a lack of trauma-informed care in our medical system. It's not, I can often feel really frustrated, when I'm attending births or when I'm, going through the medical system myself. And I think, how is this possible? And then I often take a step back and I go, because they haven't been trained. It's not that there's a lack of will. It's that there's a lack of resourcing and education for practitioners to know how to be with people who've experienced trauma, how to manage their own triggers, and how to provide care that really prioritizes autonomy and consent.
Yeah, so it's obviously such incredibly important work that you're doing, and wishing you all the best for the Resilient Care Centre or Hub. I'm curious, so the clients that you currently attract and that you've been working with, you said you're in your third year as a birth doula. So I'm curious.
I can't believe that.
Time goes quickly, doesn't it? Yeah. Do you find that most of the people that you attract are in fact fellow survivors of trauma, or not necessarily? Is that sort of not necessarily the person you're talking to all the time?
It's a real mix. I'd say I get both. I've had just 2 inquiries this week. And when I asked, how they found me, they Googled, doula and trauma informed, and I think my website came up.
Good work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just accidental. I don't think I even use the word trauma informed. I use the word trauma aware because I feel very trauma informed around survivors of sexual assault. But in terms of other traumas, I would say I'm more trauma aware, and maybe trauma responsive, because there's so many unique experiences that I never want to presume that I am across everything. I have an approach that I think is really trauma sensitive, but everyone's experience is so unique. So I have had a real mix of people over the years, but I do think that particularly when it comes to referrals around people that are looking for trauma-informed care, my name often gets floated in the space.
That's great.
Kind of what I'm known for.
Among your peers, which is wonderful.
Yeah. And that kind of happened over time. Like, even though it was so clear in my origin story that was why I was there, it didn't really, I guess, click for me until maybe the second year that was really where I can provide, that's where my niche is, I suppose. Or, but at the same time, I've worked with a lot of families that haven't experienced complex trauma. I think being a woman or a birth giver in the world, we've all experienced some kind of trauma purely by existing in a system that sees us as less than. And so I definitely still feel like I have something to offer to people, that might not have experienced so much complex trauma. So I'm open, to whoever I work with. And I think the other thing, which I wonder whether you have this as well, but because I lost my mum in the year that I had my baby, I do tend to hold space for people that don't have mothers or don't have positive relationship with their mothers, or their mums are overseas. So I really kind of feel like I can hold this space for motherless mothers, which, is another area that I like to be present in.
That's a beautiful one, and I do want to come back to that. I just wanted to touch on and reiterate what you said a moment ago about actually differentiating between trauma-informed and trauma-aware and trauma-responsive, and just repeat that so that listeners can just give it a bit more thought, because we do tend to hear, it's not my area of expertise, so do you hear trauma-aware and trauma-responsive as well being used, or are you really hearing trauma-informed mostly?
I think trauma-informed is the buzzword. at the moment. And if people are interested in this, I really encourage you to look at the work of Katie Kurtz, which is Kurtz. And she has a really beautiful free guide that kind of differentiates between, you know, the different layers of trauma awareness and sensitivity and responsiveness. It's just really helpful to go, I don't necessarily have to be trauma informed, but I can be trauma aware, or, you know, actually this is what I want to aim for, and these are the trainings that I'm going to do to work towards that.
Yeah. And we don't have to be experts in trauma in order to be responsive when we see the signs of survivors of trauma. Yeah. So thank you for highlighting that. Yes. So I do find similar in my practice. I actually also support a lot of mums who are either without mums of their own because they've passed away, or they have estranged relationships with them. It's really common in my practice, and I've wondered, I don't have a very close relationship with my family either. My mum is still alive, but she actually is unwell and has Alzheimer's, so communication is kind of, she's still here, but she's not here in a way. So I've wondered over the years if it's that I'm magnetizing these women for some reason, or if, you know, by nature of being a doula and somebody who's providing, you know, holistic, nurturing, motherly care, that we all might be coming across the same thing, all of us doulas working in the birth space, because naturally those without those figures in their life will be drawn to more support. So I'm not sure if everybody's experiencing that. I'd be curious to hear from the listeners.
You definitely have, like when I first, you know, connected with you, just such a maternal, I guess, there's a real maternal quality to your support.
It's really interesting to hear that, and I've been told that before, and it's really interesting to me because I feel like motherhood, or which I associate with this maternal, whatever it is that people are picking up on, I actually really, really, really struggle in motherhood as a mother. So I find it really interesting that people are picking up on that, and they might have the impression that being maternal is really natural and easy for me, because it's, I don't know, maybe it is more with other people than with my own kids. I'm not sure. Maybe we'll cut that out. I'm not sure. I'll think about that too.
Oh, I can definitely relate. You know, I guess it's that whole thing that we were fed that, you know, motherhood's amazing and we're just going to be so natural at it and we're going to love every minute. And then we're just, the way that our culture is constructed, we're just set up to fail, because it's just not possible to meet, you know, the expectations of what it is to be a modern woman and a modern mother. Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm just interrupting our conversation very briefly to tell you about my Intuitive Doula mentoring program, which is my signature mentoring container for fellow doulas that is a 9-month journey to help you develop more trust in your intuition and your unique offerings as a doula, so you can build your own heart-led business with the confidence that you need to thrive. But it's actually so much more than that as well. It's a program that explores how to work on yourself, how to work with clients, how to work with others, how to work with balance, how to work with boundaries, and how to work with intuition. And as I said, it's a 9-month program with live fortnightly calls. So it's 18 live group calls and interspersed with 18 videos that are shared, learning videos on topics within the framework that I just outlined. So the Intuitive Doula is perfect for you if you've completed your doula certification and are excited to support families to have more positive experiences, but you're not really sure how to take what you've learned and put it into practice with confidence. You might feel like you're trying to tick all of the boxes or deliver the same results for each family, or even turning up with a curriculum to your visits rather than walking into your visits with an open heart and an open mind and just trusting that the connection and the intuition will guide you to know how to support the families that you're working with. You're probably craving a deep and meaningful connection also with other doulas who are working in the space, and that you will certainly find in the Intuitive Doula. In fact, the women who journeyed through the program in 2023 described it as a course and a women's circle all tied into one. It was a really beautiful space. It's a safe circle of women and doulas to explore some of the really tricky and challenging topics of our work. And it's an intimate container. It's a small group. We meet for a long time and we really get to know each other well. So it's an opportunity to peel back the layers of our self-limiting beliefs and to be held accountable for those as we journey into the world of being better doulas in business. So if you're interested to know more about the Intuitive Doula program, please reach out to me at hello@marygiordano.com.au. You can also find that in the show notes. The 2024 program, the 9-month program, is starting in early March. So I'm calling out for some beautiful doulas that are called to join this cohort with me and with a group of others to journey together. So if you're interested, get in touch as soon as possible. Thank you so much. And here we will return to the show.
So I actually started studying spiritual companionship before my daughter was born. I had been on a huge chronic pain kind of journey and recovery, and I was looking at, what's next. And I thought maybe I'd train to be a coach. But when I looked at the courses that were available back then, it was very much about moving people forward. Like, you're here, you want to be here, let's work out all the steps to get you there.
A to B, yeah.
Yeah. And what I felt was, I don't want to take people forward. I want to take them deeper, deeper within themselves, deeper into their story, their experience, what it is to be human. I want a depth with people, what they encounter in their everyday life and what that means to them. And so I came across this, this approach of holding space called spiritual companionship, and kind of just dipped my toe in and fell in love. And I think it really taught me everything that I know about holding space and sitting alongside people in darkness and light. And that's, I think, the foundation of, how I move through the world, as a birth worker and as a human, really, is that deep presence with people.
So needed, as we've talked about
yeah.
up until now. So what's your vision for the Masters of Listening, or the Listening Mama, or the whole thing as it's coming together, perhaps?
Yeah.
Maybe in year 10 of your business, if you're in it for the long haul. Do you know, do you sort of have a vision of where you're taking, other than you talked about, obviously, the Resilient Care Hub Centre?
Yeah.
I imagine, bringing it all together, what will that look like for you? What are your dreams for your business?
My dream would be to see the experience of survivors of sexual assault navigating pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, to see that unique experience culturally recognised. So it is widely understood that is a unique experience that requires care and tending to in a way that is another layer than, other people that haven't experienced that. I would love that to be the case in 10 years' time. And I would love to see, a huge shift in trauma-informed care in the maternity care system, so that, trauma-sensitive care is not the add-on, it is the baseline for care. I would want to see hospital policies changed that are, re-traumatizing for survivors. And I think if we can do those two things, then we will see a reduction in birth trauma, because I think a lot of birth trauma is actually re-traumatization of people's experience of sexual assault or trauma. Yeah. So that's the big picture vision in terms of cultural and systemic change. And I think my part in that is, a mix between the Listening Mama and the Centre for Resilient Care, where I do the work, one-on-one, and that informs the resources that I create. And then through the Resilient Care, I hope to do, training for maternal care providers as well, whether that's, birth workers or midwives, or even, pelvic floor physios, because it goes across the whole continuum of care.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing such an important vision and how you see your role in this. And something I didn't ask you, but are there many others with a similar interest in this field that you are in touch with and that you are aware of? Are you one of many working towards this shift, or are you feeling that you're sort of one of few trying to agitate for such important change?
I think that there is many of us. Whenever I meet with other doulas or birth workers, it's like the first thing I say, is that kind of that way to find those connections. And often people say, oh, I'm so interested in that as well. And I really hope to bring, together a group of us to work on this, because a big thing about being a survivor is, that we've been isolated. And so, the solution is always going to be the opposite of that, which is us coming together for our voices to be heard.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
And just finally, do you have any bits of wisdom that you'd like to share to people who are either new doulas or considering becoming doulas, particularly with an interest in this area of trauma-informed, aware or responsive care?
Yeah, I would just say, just do it, just do it. It's so needed. We need more trauma-sensitive doulas, who specialise in this area, because it's such needed and important work. And the more doulas, that we have that can really sit in this space with people and advocate, alongside them, particularly in the maternity system, it's so rewarding. It's so rewarding too when you see someone take back their power or have an experience in their body that, brings so much healing. It's such a powerful thing to witness. And yeah, it's very it's very contagious, just the joy of the work. Yeah,
amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, Dusk, and I will include the things that you mentioned in the notes for people to refer to. So thank you so much for joining me on the Whole Doula podcast.
I've loved it. Thanks so much for creating this space. It's so needed.
Yes, I think so too. And I'm excited you're the last conversation in the first season, so I'm really excited to see how it's received and hear people's feedback. Thank you again for joining me, and I will be in touch with you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed listening to my conversation with Dusk. I really enjoyed unpacking with her the importance of providing trauma-aware, informed and responsive care to survivors of sexual trauma, sexual assault, but also of other kinds of trauma, and how important that is in this area of work, and hearing her vision about moving into the future where all practitioners working with women are actually trauma-informed. So I hope you enjoyed listening as well, and you can find out more about Dusk in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening to the Whole Doula podcast, and we'll be back in a fortnight with another episode. Take care. Bye.